Today, obviously, the Service Minister, Victor Dominello, and the Member for Lismore, Janelle Saffin. Today, obviously, it was very pleasing for us as well to meet many of our coordinating agencies. And what we have, the Emergency Centre here, is all areas of government, federal, state, and local government areas working very closely together to ensure we get the Northern Rivers back on their feet as quickly as possible. They've worked tirelessly from the outset, and the Deputy Premier and Janelle Saffin and I were able to see that coordination in action, and I think it's incredibly pleasing, and it certainly instills me with confidence that the work that is going on here on the ground will ensure that we get through those immediate tasks as quickly as possible. We know it has been a devastating time up here, and we're probably moving through the initial shock for many people. Difficult conditions, many, and I'll go through some of those numbers, not habitable, and it's not just here in this area. It's right across the Northern Rivers. Can I once again just thank the community? They have just done an amazing job. The spirits here remain incredibly high. The sacrifices, the courage that we've seen during this time has been absolutely inspirational, and it is really the Australian way, the New South Wales way. Our great communities coming together, pulling together to get through. In terms of where we sit today, the focus right now from the government perspective is probably in three key areas. Firstly is to get people into housing, into homes. Well, we've got an announcement which I'll get to shortly in relation to that. Secondly, getting the cleanup occurring as quickly as possible. I know it's a massive task in front of us. Everyone can see that on the ground. It is a substantial task ahead, but I'll speak to some further detail in relation to how that operation is underway and the work that we'll be doing going forward. And then also financial support, providing financial support. We're working through that now. We see the Treasurer is here today, as well as the Minister for Customer Service, who has the task of cutting through bureaucracy and red tape. We want to get financial support for those who need it out as quickly as possible to help businesses, families, farmers get back on their feet as soon as we can. Now, in relation to housing, we have currently 1,234 people in temporary emergency accommodation in the Northern Rivers. There's been around 9,200 assessments of homes, of which 5,500 are damaged. So more than half of those homes that have been assessed to date are damaged, and 2,834 are not habitable. And this is just the beginning. So there's obviously a substantial task ahead. We heard this morning that we're still having isolated communities around the Northern Rivers that still haven't been able to be accessed yet. So the ADF, thousands of ADF now on the ground, working very closely with the thousands of government service agencies who are here, working tirelessly to get into those communities as quickly as possible and provide the service that we need. So today we are announcing a package that will support approximately 25,000 households in relation to housing support. It's a $551 million package in terms of housing. I want to thank the Commonwealth Government for providing 50 funding support for this. So the package today includes 16 weeks rental support for those people who need it. We know we have many people still in our evacuation centres. As I said, we have many people in temporary accommodation. That will provide for payments for single-person households of $6,000 and for larger families over $18,000 in financial support. Being out on the ground yesterday with Janelle Saffin, I want to thank her for the advice that she provided. I rewrote the ERC submission last night to ensure that, given the lack of housing options available, that those who access this support can also do so in other states. So obviously, being border communities here, that housing will be available in Queensland. That was previously not the case. So we made that change late last night. We're also providing support for pod dwellings for in the interim, whilst people may be rebuilding. Mobile motorhomes will start coming up from the 13th of March, and the Department of Community Justice is supporting that. We're also, in addition to this, looking at longer term and medium term housing options. We've also, through the Department of Community and Justice, purchased out many recreational camps in the Northern Rivers, which has capacity for another 270 people. So that is underway as well. So this is multi-layered, given the extensive issues that we are facing. As I said, this will cater for up to 25,000 people. So that's a substantial task that's in front of us. And as I said, where gaps do arise, we will address them. I mean, this is the position we see now based on the time on the ground over the last week, that we believe this is the support that will help people get through. But if there are things that we miss, obviously we will address as soon as we can. We want people out of evacuation centres. We want people who have gone through the trauma and are unable to return home to be able to get into that accommodation. And we've doubled the amounts that have been available in the past, because we do know as well, with a lack of rental accommodation, we would expect through Airbnb as well, that obviously with the high cost associated with that, that this financial support will provide assistance to get people into housing, into homes as quickly as possible. Quickly on the clean-up, which is obviously, as many of you know, the substantial task that's ahead of it. It's been coordinated through the police force, and obviously we had Deputy Commissioner Mal Lanyon here yesterday. He'll be back tomorrow, and through Public Works Advisory and the Council. I want to thank the Council for the work that they're doing, working very closely with the government. We have 45 clean-up trucks in Lismore, 93 across the Northern Rivers, 230 skip bins. On one day, just the other day, we had 4,000 tonnes of debris that were collected in one day alone. We've had one truck a minute coming through those centres in terms of dropping off that, disposing of that waste. And today we are allocating $90 million to assist with that clean-up. Now, this is a major task, as you'd be aware, and it's end-to-end across the Northern Rivers. I just want to assure all residents, all the communities right across here, we are putting every resource we can to get this clean-up conducted as quickly as possible. It's obviously not going to take days. It's going to take weeks, if not longer, but we are doing everything we can to provide that support as quickly as possible. And I want this clean-up done. So look at those priorities, short-term priorities. Housing, today we've started that process, the clean-up underway, and the financial support, which as I've said, we want to make sure we finalise, streamline those programs so that we can get that assistance out the door as quickly as possible. I want to make a comment in relation to actually some of the negative comments in terms of Resilience New South Wales, and I think it's important as Premier that I address that. I was out at Murwillumbah Recovery Centre yesterday. I was out with Janelle Saffin. I was out in Mullumbimby with the local member there, Tamara Smith, and Catherine Cusack and the Mayor yesterday at the Recovery Centre. And I'm very pleased with what I'm seeing and the support and the coordination that Resilience New South Wales is providing all those services. We had a briefing in there today that these people, our people right across the board, but including Resilience, and young Laura in there from Resilience New South Wales has been working for the last 12 days, completely exhausted, from Ballina, has had her own challenges in relation to her personal situation and a family situation through this time, and they are working tirelessly to get all our communities back on their feet as quickly as possible and coordinating that response. Particularly pleasing to see in places like Mullumbimby, where we couldn't get access obviously for many days, and the community came together there and set up their own centre, and now that's working very closely and in alignment with the recovery centre there. So there's 6 recovery centres across the board, and that's bringing together all those essential social services, Service New South Wales staff there, We've had obviously Services Australia support staff there as well. The Department of Community and Justice working through housing, and obviously off the back of this package today, the support for housing will become more prominent through those recovery centres. We've had Suncorp were there yesterday providing support in relation to insurance claims. So and also Australian Government Support Services as well. So I think in some of those areas we need to ramp up some staff, particularly from Service New South Wales. I certainly saw that in Murwillumbah. And we'll look and obviously we'll look at doing that as we move through and act on those changes. I think also we need a bit more, which we're working through, mental health support in those recovery centres. It's certainly apparent to me that that's the case. But what's pleasing to see is that they're operating well, and we have the whole of government response there together. So, in conclusion, we're putting everything we can to get this task completed as quickly as possible. We know that all members of this community have gone through a very difficult time, and there is a long journey ahead. But from the government's perspective, we will be with you side by side, day after day, week after week, month after month, as we move through this difficult time. I'm incredibly confident, from what I've seen, the spirit on the ground, the team's hard at work, that we will get through that. And it can seem overwhelming, the task that lies ahead, but I know that we will. We've done it before, and we will do it again as a state, as a great people, and whether it's the cleanup, housing, financial support, and then we move into medium to long-term infrastructure support, rebuilding the roads, rebuilding the bridges. We will get it done. We will get it done together. I have complete faith. This has been a freak event that has caused so much heartache, so much pain and anguish for many, many people. But I know we'll get through. Let's keep our spirits up, keep strong, and we will ensure that the long road ahead that we will succeed as a state, and then the people of the Northern Rivers, I know, will get through this and come out stronger the other side. Now I'm going to pass to the Deputy Premier, and then the Treasurer will speak in relation to the costings and the financial support that we're providing for housing today, and then Minister Dominello will provide, from a Service New South Wales perspective, what we're doing in terms of ensuring that we're cutting down that red tape and the paperwork to get money out the door as quickly as possible to those who need it. And then the local member, Janelle Saffin, will say some words as well about what she's seeing on the ground here in the local community. Thanks.
Well, thanks, Premier. And firstly, can I just begin by saying thank you to all of our police, emergency services, all our volunteers that are out there working on the ground. As the Premier said, many people have been working day after day, long hours, to ensure that these communities are safe and are getting on with the recovery efforts. Could I also do a shout out to all those volunteers as well that continue to provide support on the ground, but also thank the families of those members that are allowing these volunteers to be out there working tirelessly in these communities. Today's package is very important, and the reason the package has been tailored in the way in which it has is because the Premier and myself, by working with those on the ground over many days, has ensured that it is tailored for the needs of these communities. It is tailored for individuals that have been impacted by the floods, businesses that have been impacted, primary producers and councils. And today is the first tranche of a number of support packages that will be rolled out in this particular area. Now, as we look at the recovery and as we look at the cleanup, it is going to be a huge task. Now, this morning I went to Alstonville and I had a look at the waste facility there. There are 700 trucks a day going through that facility right now. That is one truck per minute. Yesterday there was around 2,500 tonnes of waste that was put into that facility. The Lismore City Council, its transfer facility, also saw 1,000 tonnes of material yesterday go in there, 300 truckloads as well. And we're seeing another quarry being opened up at Peterson. This means that we want to see the clean-up work happening as quickly as possible. That is important for these communities, and we are throwing all resources into ensuring that that happens. Today, I want to also remind people about our recovery centres that have been established across these areas. These recovery centres are so important. For many people, they don't know where to go. They don't know what advice to actually seek. But what we've seen with these recovery centres is that they are a one-stop shop. That means people can go into these facilities, they can talk to different agencies, and they can get the information that is going to help them get back on their feet. And there is nothing more devastating to losing all of your belongings. For many people, they've lost their licence. They've lost their documents, their passports to even show who they actually are. So they can go into these facilities and get the advice and support that is needed. Talk to the Salvation Army. Talk about how they can get a roof over their heads, how they can get financial support, how they can actually get mental health and well-being support as well. I encourage the communities, as these recovery centres continue to open up in these areas, to go and visit them and to ensure that you are getting the right advice. Again, I know that the Premier and myself and the local members in these areas have been talking really hard with those on the ground. You know, you can't just come in one day and fly out the next. We've spent days on the ground talking to all of those people that it matters to, people that have lost their houses, people that have actually invited us in to show us the extent and the damage that is in front of them, how big this clean-up is going to be. And I want to make this point as well. We will stand side by side with you over the coming months and over the coming years. This is a big job, and this is a partnership that we will have with the communities of the Northern Rivers.
Well, today's new package will see a significant amount of money going to where it's needed most. Our focus will be on getting that money into the hands who need it as soon as possible. There'll be no expense spared. My message to the community is we are here for you, we understand your frustrations, and we will leave no stone unturned to ensure that you get back on your feet as soon as possible. Today's announcement includes a $285 million commitment to ensuring that everyone who needs it has a roof over their head. A significant investment will be made in rental relief for up to 16 weeks for temporary accommodation. In addition to that, we'll be spending $20 million to provide pods for people who are rebuilding their houses on their existing properties. This is a significant investment to ensure that everyone who needs a roof over their head will have one in the short term. We'll obviously be looking at a number of measures over the longer term, but today's announcement is ensuring that everyone has a roof over their head, is safe, and can get through this period. Today we'll also be announcing an additional $90 million to assist councils across New South Wales with the clean-up effort. We already announced that up to $1 million of support would be available for the 17 councils that were declared disaster areas. We've added an additional 28 councils across the state to support them with their recovery efforts through this period. As I said, my message to the community up in Lismore, my message to communities right across New South Wales is just as we stood by you during the pandemic, just as we stood by you during the bushfires, so too will we use our strong financial position to stand by you during these floods and make sure that you get back on your feet as soon as possible.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, everyone. As the Premier said, people have suffered enough. They don't need to suffer with more red tape, particularly as they're applying for all this assistance that is coming their way. And what we're doing, particularly through Service New South Wales, is to make sure we get rid of that red tape so we can get money to them as soon as possible in the easiest way possible. As the Treasurer just said, we're going to be there helping people in the rental support package, which is a total of $248 million. We will make sure that that is a seamless process. You won't have to provide a whole ream of information, just need to indicate whether you're single, couple, family, and we can work through the packages with you to make sure that you get the assistance as is required. It will be retrospective and prospective in operation, so we'll make sure that you get that assistance as is required. If I could also give an update in relation to the business support package, the $50,000 packages that we released earlier this week. So far, over 800 businesses have applied for that support package, and the feedback has been very positive because, again, it is a pretty seamless process to go through. You can apply online, and the money will be flying out the door within 5 business days. Another thing I'd like to comment on is that there have been a number of service centres that have been impacted, and we understand that not everybody can go online, and that's a real challenge. when communication channels are down, people need to go to physical service centres. So what we've done immediately, as the Deputy Premier has said, we've established staff in the evacuation centres, in the recovery centres, and we've also got 2 mobile service buses that are here in Murwillumbah and at Lismore. And that's to make sure that they can provide the additional support that people need. So, for example, as the Deputy Premier said, when people lose a lot of things in floods, including documents such as birth certificates, such as marriage certificates, such as driver's licenses, please do not go through the stress and anxiety of thinking, how do I recover that? All you need to do is contact service 137788 or attend one of the centres, and they are there to help you recover or replace those documents, those critical documents, as soon as possible. Another thing I'd like to say is in relation to the various centres around. There are the ones that have been impacted are now back online, which are Tweed, Ballina, Grafton, Casino, Maclean. Those service centres are now, and have been for a number of days, up and running. Murwillumbah opens hopefully tomorrow, and then there's Lismore. We are literally looking for a temporary site to set up a service centre in Lismore as soon as practicable, because we know that there is a huge demand there. But again, we do have the mobile bus and the service centre available as well. Can I just finally conclude on over 1,200 people have registered for accommodation assistance. This is again a call out today to call 137788, call service or attend one of the various centres if you need assistance. Please register and make sure that your voice is heard so that we can provide that much needed assistance, because you are going through hell on earth here at the moment, and we need to be there with you. Thank you.
Adjust. Exactly. I know. Thanks, Miranda. Look, I know you're all anxiously awaiting to ask the Premier and others questions, but I'm going to have my say. And firstly, I'd like to say just thank you, and thank you to all the local media for the fantastic job you've done throughout this too, when we've had no communications, to try and keep those communication channels going. And some of you I know have been impacted as well, so thank you to you. And to the community that I represent, which is the Lismore electorate, and I keep saying it, it's Murwillumbah, Tweed Valley, Lismore, Kyogle, and also Tenterfield. To the community for everything that you did in rescuing and now recovery, a big thank you. To everyone in the uniform, everyone who's got a badge, a big thank you as well. And to the Premier and his team that I've been out and about with, and with the Premier quite a bit, I just want to say thank you for hearing our voices directly from people and through me as a representative. And I'm seeing that today in the announcement. From day one I've been saying we need housing. There's so many things we need, but housing is the number one. People have to be assured they will have a home, they've got a roof, and it won't be just overnight or 3 nights in a motel. And the announcement today does that. It has 3 components to it. It ups the amount for the rental subsidy. We do know how hard it is for places, but DCJ and others, DCJ Housing and others are working on that. It does the pods on people's properties where they want to be and need to be so they can rebuild, and we'll also have some of the relocatable homes coming in. So I said to the Premier, that's welcome, that's a good start. I'll keep banging on in Parliament about longer term housing, as you know. I did ring the Treasurer, I left a message on his mobile. I said, it's too bloody hard. So I said, fix some of the red tape. And he's here today, and I'm always pleased to see a Treasurer because they have cash. And that's good. I need to see the Federal Treasurer with his cash too. And haven't seen Josh yet, so I hope he turns up with it. But look, that's all I want to say. I've got more to say about as the days goes on, and you know, there's so many issues, so many things people raise. I can assure everybody that we'll deal with a lot of that in the Parliament when we're all back in Parliament, and when we go through lessons learned, continuous improvement, how can we do this better, and how can we fully integrate the service response, emergency services with our community, because we need both. And we need to make sure that they're fully integrated with the interoperability to make sure that we all know what we're doing when some of these major events happen again. But look, I just want to say thank you to the Premier. I think I've got to know you more during this than I did before. Yeah, unfortunate circumstances. I did know the Treasurer. And also to Tooley as Deputy Premier, and also to Minister Dominello, who I trapped in the lift one day, and he looked rather terrified, and I said, I love Service New South Wales. So he looked so relieved. I said, but you can do this and this and this. So look, to my whole community, thank you. We're suffering, we're hurting, we do have some trauma, but we'll get there. We're resilient, we're strong, and I said we need the government to back us in, and this is a start today. Thank you. Premier.
Thanks, Janelle. No one said they want to ask Janelle a question after we raise it.
You're from the shortest to the tallest.
I know. Thanks, Miranda.
Sorry.
Questions?
Premier, you mentioned the priorities. Utilities.
Yeah.
When is the power and
Yep.
sewage going to be back on?
So utilities is going well. So Essential Energy, who are here today, and part of the operation inside, are working around the clock to reconnect homes and businesses to power where it is safe to do so. And it was remiss of me to not thank Essential Energy, because they are doing they are actually ahead of where we expect them to be. There are many areas that cannot be reconnected at the moment for a number of reasons. One, they still are isolated, and in addition to that, it's unsafe to do so in certain communities across the Northern Rivers, but they are working around the clock. Just yesterday, driving around the Northern Rivers, I must have passed a number of Essential Energy crews who were up reconnecting homes as quickly as they could, and I want to thank them very much for that. But obviously, in order for these communities to get back on their feet, getting electricity connected is essential.
What about telephone companies? You know, 000, people haven't been able to call them, and then when they did call 000, who made the decision that those 000 calls would then be directed to the SES?
I'm not sure of that, but obviously telecommunications has been a real challenge here. It's very difficult to coordinate an emergency response when there's no telecommunications. So obviously when we get through this, that's something that needs to be looked at. We've been in, from a government perspective, constant dialogue with the telcos to get telecommunications in those areas connected as quickly as possible, and we'll continue to be on the case. Obviously, we're seeing telecommunications come back in the major towns, but obviously early on, it was in Ballina last week, was still down, and Lismore and places like that. But obviously, we're concerned at the moment on those small outlying communities that are in more isolated areas, that we get those telecommunications up and running as quickly as possible. One of the issues that was raised in there as well is as people are getting access to telecommunications, what we're finding is requests for help are immediately being made. So there are many people at the moment who are still isolated, who don't have access to telecommunications, who may require urgent supplies and assistance. So we are working very closely to do that, and I know the team in there are going into a number of these communities. The ADF are going into areas, so even when those communities may be still isolated, the ADF are going out into those communities with supplies to provide that support.
But what about at the time of the floods happening? People were calling 000, and they were being told, ring the SES.
I'll get some advice on that.
What about CBD buildings? You've heard about the homes. Are there any condemned or need to be condemned in the CBD?
In Lismore? Yes.
Numbers?
Well, the numbers I have, I'm going to get you specific. Lismore, I'll get to them. I'll get you them after I had those numbers inside. And these are homes. These are homes that you've got those homes that are not habitable going forward, and that is 2,834. That's across the Northern Rivers in total. I'll get you a exact figure which we have inside in relation to those homes that we think will need to be demolished in the Lismore Town Centre. And obviously I'd want that to occur as quickly as possible. We learned a lot through the bushfires. Actually, we learned a lot from the Victorian government when we went through the bushfires here in terms of having a one contractor model, in terms of going through and cleaning up those homes that need to be destroyed. So obviously we're working through that now, but I'll get you that exact number. It's inside.
What about houses for people with disabilities and special needs?
Absolutely,
That
that's incorporated into this as
so
well.
What's happening with that?
Well, DCJ obviously acquire homes, and particularly in some of those, the caravan parks and the like, their job is to tailor accommodation to the needs of those of families. So obviously, larger families, larger homes, those people with special needs, those people with a disability, that's all factored in, run out by the Department of Communities and Justice to ensure that we provide housing in a way that supports the needs of those people right across the.
What about at the time of the emergency, people with disabilities? That has come up as a big issue, that they were unable to be rescued as easily as everyone else. Is there something that you need to look at in the actual emergency response time for people with special needs?
Oh, definitely. I think, as I've said, I mean, today's not the time for reviews. That time's going to come, and when it does, I think the immediate response and how and the multifaceted nature of that, we will have an honest assessment, and where there are areas where we can improve, particularly in circumstances where there are people with disabilities. One thing that struck me certainly over the last 10 days or so has been in those communities that are isolated, where in the time that elapses between the government being able to access those communities, how do you structure government services, and what is the organisational structure in place in towns that needs to be stood up straight away? So I think that's something that certainly struck me over this period. But there'll be a lot of learnings. There'll be a lot of learnings from that period that we will need to implement going forward, and we'll have a complete review. But as I said, we've got a long journey ahead of us at the moment. My clear focus is to get people into homes, to get the clean-up done as quickly as possible, and to get financial support out for those who need it.
On the financial support, what about the local government areas that haven't been included in the PM's announcement yesterday for that extra disaster relief? You've got Ballina, you've got Byron, Tweed.
Yeah, they're included with this.
Oh,
That
$1,000 for each person?
That's federal. That's federal
I know,
funding.
but what's your response to the federal government not including those, seeing as you've seen those communities?
Oh, look, as far as I'm concerned, I'm announcing a housing package today, and I completely appreciate the Commonwealth Government's 50-50 funding support, and I'll work with whoever we need to. Commonwealth, councils, doesn't bother me. Labor, Liberal, we're all in this. This is not the time for politics. This is the time to get things done. This is the time to get every community back on their feet as quickly as possible. Now, I would say, I've been out to all of these areas, and yes, there are some areas where there has been more damage and more suffering than others. But that doesn't mean that in areas where there is not as much damage that they're not in need. I was out in Mullumbimby yesterday, and there are substantial challenges there. We're going out to Woodburn this afternoon. And so some of those communities have been devastated, and many people, particularly I think in Woodburn, are going back to a community that has just been completely inundated and torn apart. And we're just going to do whatever it takes to get them back on their feet as quickly as possible. It's going to be a long journey, but we're in it all the way.
Do you understand the frustration of locals yesterday who wanted to see the Prime Minister? Did you think he made a mistake in not going out there and speaking to people on the street?
Look, once again, I don't want to get into a division between the state and the Commonwealth government.
But people just wanted to see their
look,
Prime Minister.
I mean, look, there'll be always different views on that. I mean, I understand the Prime Minister's view of wanting to have private discussions with people. I've been up here for a while, and sometimes it can be a bit in your face when the cameras are there and you're speaking to people and you're hearing some pretty traumatic stories. I've certainly felt that. But you know, at the same time, I think the best way to learn is to get out and about and be on the streets and speak to as many people as possible. What's really helped me in terms of this period of time in informing these packages has been speaking to people on the ground and taking that advice on. The structure where we've come up with bringing in Deputy Commissioner Mal Lanyon, I think was very clear to me. The task here was of such gravity that I needed somebody of such seniority and experience to lead it. But ultimately what we've done as well, through feedback on the ground, through local members like Janelle, Jeff Provost, Tamara Smith, it's really struck me, you know, someone from Sydney, different perspective, that the importance of the local community in driving the recovery and having that input not just come from the top down, from the state government coming into town and saying, here's what we're going to do. We need to have that buy-in and ideas coming through. And I think what I've heard on the ground from the local community, we've been incorporating constantly. And I also know, particularly places like Mullumbimby yesterday, the more it's worked, it would have been a challenge, but it's worked, in that you've now got greater integration between the recovery centre run by Resilience New South Wales and the local community centre. And there was probably some tension there at the start, but now they're working together. And I think by having that local community input is going to help not just build morale and spirit, but that intel is going to help us rebuild faster and better than we had before.
Premier,
yeah.
We sadly have seen this movie before. On the South Coast, the same thing happened.
Yeah.
Pods were brought in, mobile homes were brought in. 2 years later, people are still living in them. So post 16 weeks, what is going to happen on the Northern Rivers? You can't rebuild a house in 16
No.
weeks.
Well, we'll work through that. I mean, this is an announcement today. I agree with you. I don't want to see that happen. Okay, I don't want to see that happen. This is kind of what I would say is the short-term recovery response. There needs to be a medium-term and a long-term response as well. Now, I know what the long-term response is. That is a greater investment in social and affordable housing in this region, and I'm completely in for that and completely committed to doing that, as is the Treasurer, which is important because he'll be paying for it. But on the medium term,
to making sure you don't forget about that.
Oh, we're not,
it does feel
absolutely
like on the South Coast, medium and long term got forgotten about.
Be committed to me, and I'll hold him to it. Okay, for us.
I think what the bushfires showed, and there were aspects of that response that went well, and I think sometimes when we have these natural disasters, it's generally short-term focused, and the pain and the trauma gets worse, and the sense of abandonment, whilst you might feel that at the start, could actually get progressively worse as the years progress. And it's the role of us to be here every step of the way, and that's really struck me whilst being here. And I'm very genuine when I say this government's not going to be here just for days. We're going to be here for weeks, months and years ahead, because this journey is going to be a long one. There's a massive task in front of us now, and I know that when we get this clean-up complete, if we can get that done as quickly as possible, that's going to lift spirits even more so in our towns. There's a lot of work to be done in terms of getting homes habitable again, so that's going to be the next step, which we'll have something to say about very shortly, and getting that financial support out, key focus. But Liz, you're right. This is not a short-term support for the community. It's medium to long-term, and as we get closer to the end, like the 16 weeks, then we'll work out the plan from that point forward. My main focus right now is I've got hundreds, if not thousands of people in evacuation centres. I've got people staying at family and friends. I need them into homes as quickly as possible, and this work will do that.
Premier, many people in South and North Lismore have been through these floods, not to this extent before. Is there a consideration of a buyback scheme for people who just simply don't want to go home? They don't want to go back into their house and have to relive this the next time there's more floods?
Well, we have to work through. I mean, we want Lismore to be built back better than it was before. That's obviously a focus for us. And we want to do so in a way, working very closely with the local community. And we want to instill confidence. So these are discussions that we will have. As I said, as part of the structure in terms of the recovery work, we've incorporated local committees, local organisations to provide that advice and feedback through, and we will take that on board. But I don't want anyone to feel like they have to leave.
What happens if they don't want to go back?
If they don't want to go...
If they don't want to go back to their homes,
Well,
are
we'll-
you considering a buyback scheme?
But we'll look at it. We'll put nothing's off the table here. Nothing's off the table. I'll look at everything. I want to make sure that those I want to build these communities back stronger than they were before. That might mean we build them back differently, because we don't want to be in a position where every time we have a flood, we have this destruction, and people go through immense anguish and despair. No one should go through that. Now, live in a country where there are natural disasters, and but Insanity's doing the same thing over and over again, and we need to build back in a smart way, but in a way that instills confidence in the community that they don't want to leave. And if they do, and if people want to move to other areas in the Northern Rivers, for example, then we'll look at it. Nothing is off the table in our response. But when I don't want to sit here and theorise about what we could do here or here or here down the track. I'm focused right now, and it has to be, whilst we've got different work streams happening, coordinating this response, getting the cleanup completed as quickly as possible, and that's going to put people in the best space to actually address those issues for themselves. They can hardly think about that when their homes are in the state that they're in right now. So I need to get the cleanup done, I need to get people in their homes, and to get money in their pockets. That's what I'm going to get done as quickly as possible, and the team here behind me supports that.
Premier, prevention is central to the role of the Resilience Commission. At what point are you going to stop taking bullets for Commissioner Fitzsimmons over the disaster preparation and response?
Look, I take bullets every day. That's kind of my job. As I said earlier, there will be a review in relation to prevention and the initial response period from the outset, and I can already just myself see things that I think we can do better going forward, particularly in those isolated communities that don't have access. I spoke earlier about the time that it takes for government officials from DCJ or from Resilience New South Wales, Housing Service New South Wales to get in, following let's not forget this was a unprecedented, unpredicted catastrophe. Okay, so this was a freak event. But when they happen, and we always have to prepare for the worst, we need to have structures in place, in my view, so that when the community is there, that they're trained and there's that level of authority, so that that can coordinate and help get people through. I think that's certainly come through to me from the locals in those communities, and that's something we should look at. But I want to make the point I raised earlier. What I'm seeing on the ground now in our 6 recovery centres. Now, I think we can improve resourcing a bit, and I've picked up on that, and we will. But what I've seen is it's going well, and the feedback from local community groups and the councils in relation to resilience on the ground is incredibly positive. I'm not just saying that. I'm just relaying what I'm hearing from local community groups and the councils on the ground, and that fills me with confidence. I'd tell you if I wasn't confident about it. I'm confident about where and the role that resilience is playing and that coordination. I've seen it firsthand, and I'll see it again this afternoon, later in the day. But yeah, there will be a review, and as there should be, because you have to be honest when these situations occur. When people come up to me and say they felt isolated, they felt abandoned, I don't want anyone to feel like that. And if there are things that we can do better when we reflect on this and do an honest assessment, we will act on.
I mean, people are going back into their homes, some that can, and are probably now cleaned out or cleaning out, drying their homes, but they've lost about $50,000 worth of content. Yeah. Is there support for them to help them? That's coming.
We're working through that at the moment. And in addition to that, can I thank? There's a lot of people who have contacted me, a lot of leading corporate figures about getting donations in for white goods and things like that. So we're going to bring all of that together on Sunday night as well. There's a telethon that the Red Cross, I think, is heading up, and there'll be donations that come through. But I ask everybody to reach out and do and donate to to that cause, because we want to do everything when someone does come. Obviously, there are many homes that once cleaned out will be able to be lived in again, and we want to provide as much support as we can as quickly as possible and make them feel special and make their homes not just a house but a home. And we'll do whatever we can to do that, and the government will support and play a role in supporting that. But I also see the private sector and donations backing that in.
Premier, there's been a lot of building supply issues for many, many months caused by, Orbeez, COVID, all that sort of stuff. Are you concerned about people being able to actually rebuild, like physically rebuilding, because of lack of supplies?
Yes, and we've had labour shortages in the past, and we'll work through that and do a call out to. I mean, I've also heard this, speaking of the Treasurer, the last 24 hours in relation to panels, insurance panels. They've got shortages on their panels as it is, and we've had shortages in the past. Not just a statewide issue; it's a nationwide issue. So, got some ideas on that in terms of how we can bring in. It's not just labour; it's supplies as well that are restrained. It's also tradies. We need. I'd love to see tradies come into town. We need electricians. We need plumbers. You can start up at the Goldie and come down, and don't take housing away from where we need it here. But we need as many people to come in here, all hands on deck. And if you can lend a hand, if you're from Sydney and you've got capacity, come up and help.
In terms of tradies coming in, there's access to hundreds of tradies that can be mobilised. Is there funding available in terms of housing to get people back to their actual houses and bringing people these sparkies down that you can commit to?
Yeah, we'll look at that. I mean, as I said to the previous question, we want to do as much as we can to get as many people here who have capacity to help out, hands on the ground. Now, obviously, right now, in communities across Northern Rivers, we are focused on getting the cleanup done as quickly as possible, but that will move very quickly. Absolutely, and our great teams at Essential Energy are working around the clock to reconnect, and they're doing that. But then, obviously, when it comes to housing,
we still need CCWs done by standard sparkies. Are there ways that we can bring in standard sparkies that aren't spread thin in these areas?
Yes, as I said, we're looking at that, and if there are ways in which we can, if there are ways in which we can look at potentially incentivising, it's on the table. I said we'll look.
We can mobilise. Thank you.
No worries, mate. Thanks,
Thank you.
Yeah.
When you were Treasurer, did you support the formation of a new multi-billion-dollar resilience agency, now accused with overlapping the roles of the SES and the RFS and not delivering on its commitments?
Look, when I was Treasurer, I opposed almost everything. That was my job. There are always different views, and I'm not going to go into discussions at like confidential cabinet meeting. But what I'll say is, I think the premise is slightly incorrect, because there was a previous body that had an overarching role of all the emergency service agencies, or it's SES, RFS, and the like. Now, that was dismantled, and resilience came in its replacement. Now, there's always going to be criticism of various government agencies from time to time, but I just want to keep making this point. In terms of recovery, the whole point here is the coordination of government agencies and services in a way that delivers outcomes on the ground. I am seeing that every day. Now, if I say something negative about the media, Liz will clap her hands, but I just think that what you're seeing on the ground here in terms of those 6 recovery centres, and as they get rolled out, is working. Resourcing can be better, but it's working. It's coordinating those groups across the board. Now, if there are improvements that can be made in relation to prevention and immediate response, which I think there is a lot of merit to, we will look at that, and I am completely committed to where changes need to be made. They will be. But what I'm seeing now is what I expect.
Thanks. Can I just ask on another matter? It does seem trivial in light of everything you're talking about here, but it affects a lot of people. Potholes are opening up all over the state. You've got a policy or an idea that's been put forward for people to be able to report potholes themselves. Can you just talk us through where that small...
Someone over there.
No,
That's Victor.
It's Victor.
The big issues. There he is.
What we need to do is make sure that we have a better response than what we've been doing for decades and decades. We've got 128 different councils. We've got state roads. People want to make it easier to report a pothole, but one thing we're looking at is to make things smarter as well. So garbage trucks, for example, go down every street, every road, every lane in the state at least once a week. If we can put cameras or sensors underneath or around those trucks so that they can identify the potholes, then we can identify really quickly in real time, which holes are the biggest, which ones are on main roads, i.e. the most dangerous, and then prioritise accordingly. Also, we've done trials with Canterbury Bankstown and some other areas, and it's showing really good results. But ultimately, if we can then, once we get on top of this issue, then start seeing there's a crack in the road, let's fix that before it becomes a pothole. So what I want to try and do out of this flood is to actually improve our systems, not simply go back to the old way.
Right.
Good to see you.